the foundation budget chasing actual.
Yeah. We've not had any notice as far as Dave, John, or Susan not being able to join us. So let's just wait a little bit.
Yeah. I've got some news on and TV news on in the background. I think it's a Boston channel, and they were just referring to some Chapter 70
Oh, were they? Yeah.
stuff too. I didn't hear what it was with respect to, but it's hard to find anything other than Senate confirmation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a lot of the local stuff seems to be getting drowned out by the national stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly now that the president's declared that he's declared victory over the virus. So did that in his rally yesterday.
Nothing to be scared about.
No.
200,000 people, 210,000 people dead.
Almost 220 now. So
Yeah.
we can talk offline about that.
Talk online about it. It's all through.
Well, you didn't hear, you guys didn't hear, but we've taken Corrine off the beach today. She's down in South Carolina, right? Myrtle Beach, South Carolina? Yeah, so.
Yeah, I'm about 30 miles of Myrtle. Myrtle has they have shootings every night down there.
Do they really? Wow.
Yeah, North Myrtle's more expanded community, golf course and retirees. But I'm only 10 miles from the beach, west.
So you're doing retirement right.
Well, I hope so. The weather is great.
As opposed to what Susan Heward talks about. Failing out on retirement.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was, I did that last year.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I smartened up. It was a reality check.
I think that now that I'm thinking in my head, I think Susan wasn't able to come today. I think she had, because it's a different day of the week. I can look. So this may be who we have.
Now, I had a question for you, all of you, about what's the process that's moving forward once a report is submitted on December 1st? It sounds like we even have meetings scheduled in the middle of December. So I'm trying to get a handle on, what commitments moving forward. Is there something in January that can be done, or moving forward? You know what I mean? I'm trying to plan. Do I go after another part-time job of something, or, I just needed to know what route this was going and what's expected, what opportunities might be there to help push the cause through. I don't know. So just looking for some guidance on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll definitely be lots of opportunities to testify on bills, and we'll definitely be needing members of the commission to help out in that regard.
Okay.
The commission itself remains in force until the legislature acts on the commission's recommendations. So
Oh, so that could be a little while.
Yeah, but
Okay.
but I guess, you know, a couple of caveats there that I don't see us necessarily having to repeat the heavy lift that we're completing right now.
Yeah.
You know, there may have to be, depending upon how long it takes the legislature to act on things, you know, adjustments to make or something like that.
Yep.
So that's the first caveat, and then the second one is because it's a commission that extends beyond a single legislative session, that membership in the commission is certainly subject to you know, the appointments that are, or the the nominations that are authorized in the legislation.
Okay.
So essentially the speaker, the Senate president, and the governor.
Mhm. Okay, thanks.
So we have Susan. Welcome, Susan.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Susan.
Took me a bit to get here for some reason today.
I
I took a
couldn't,
shortcut and ended up in the woods.
I couldn't remember if it was last time or this time, Susan, then that you weren't able to go. I guess it was last time.
Yeah. I haven't quite mastered having 2 or 3 meetings at the same time. So,
Well, you're supposed to be in retirement, right?
yes. You know, I was rather tentative about it, but now I can't wait for July 1st, 2021. I think I'll get it right this time.
Right, yeah.
Right, Corinne?
Yeah, trust me, that's a mistake you aren't going to make a second time.
Spoken like someone who's experienced it.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm going to call the session together here. This is a meeting of the engagement work group for October 13th. It's now 1:08, and in accordance with the governor's order that authorizes electronic meetings of the commission, we will go through the initial protocol of introducing ourselves and where we are currently seated and having this meeting. So this is Mel Myler, and I'm the chair of the engagement group, and I'm calling from Port Clyde, Maine. Corinne?
Corinne Cascadden. I am dialing or calling in from Longs, South Carolina, about 10 miles west of North Myrtle Beach.
Good. Susan?
I'm Susan Hewitt. I'm jealous of where Corinne is. I'm calling in from Hooksett, New Hampshire.
And I'd also like to have other members of the commission who are attending this session introduce themselves. David?
Dave Luneau here in Hopkinton, New Hampshire. My wife is in the house, as well as Ozzy the Long-Haired Ducks.
Dick Ames?
Yeah, I'm here in Jaffrey in my home office, and I'm alone. Excuse me.
Thank you. Mary Heath?
Hi, Mary Heath here in Manchester. My husband's in the other room.
And Senator Khan?
In Keene, and my wife is elsewhere in the house. I'll be moving around once I finish lunch.
Good. And we have from the Carsey School, Bruce Mallory.
Hi, calling in from Kittery Point, Maine. I'm at home alone.
Thank you. Jordan Hensley.
Jordan Hensley here in Dover. My fiance is also in the house.
And Dr. Carrie.
Oh, hi. I'm Carrie Portree, calling in from Dover. I'm alone in my apartment
Right.
other than my cats.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we're going to be dealing with today is that you did receive the notice of the survey, that were the results of the survey. One of the things that I want to do today is not go into the weeds on the survey because we've arranged to have members of the survey organization meet with the engagement group. Is it on the 22nd, Carrie?
Yes, on October 22nd.
So on October 22nd, there will be those who basically conducted the survey to meet with us and to go in depth with the survey, its meaning, what its findings were, etc. But today I thought what we would do is look at part of the executive summary of that survey to see if there are questions that members of the committee have that we can then pose so that the survey, those who conducted the survey can then focus their attention on those items. So let's take just a brief period of time initially to look to see what were some of your reactions to the survey, questions that you have that come from the survey. Obviously, the survey was conducted of 1,030 different people, and they are the basis for the results of the survey. Are there general concerns that or issues that impressed you as you looked at that survey, knowing full well we just got copies of it just a day or so ago? Yeah, Corinne?
I just had a question on the number of respondents. What percentage of those that received the survey is that? I mean, what's the percentage of returns?
I don't know. Carrie, do you have any information on that?
Scrolling toward the technical note at the bottom, it's on page 15, and it says the response rate for the September grants day poll is 37%.
This is of the panel that they use for all of their surveys.
That's correct.
Great, thanks.
Other issues around the survey?
So Mel?
Susan has her hand up. Susan?
Dave was speaking before I got my hand up, so I'm happy to wait. Okay. So my question is around what we would call special education. There's just a little bit of information in the survey, but not much. And so I'd like to hear some more either today or from our speakers next week about that piece of it.
Okay. So we'll make a note to have special education. One of the things that I thought was interesting too is that the number, obviously this is an obvious issue, but the number of people who just don't understand the whole issue of school funding. And I think that provides a potential challenge for this group to look to see how we might expand that knowledge base as we go forward. David, you had a question.
No, I think I'll hold off on it.
Okay. Any other general concerns regarding the survey itself, just as you look at the top line of the results? So we want to hold our further conversations then when the survey folks are here on the 20th. And we will have a session. There's a question on whether or not we are going to have a session on the 22nd. And clearly we are going to have a session on the 22nd since we arranged to have them come forward. And I'll make a special note too to both David and John to ensure that they can clear their schedules because this is an important conversation that we're going to have. And then on the 26th, we'll be able to have a fuller conversation about the survey with the members of the commission too. Bruce or Jordan, do you have any other further comments on the survey as we go forward?
I think the only other thing that sticks out to me is just thinking about what you were saying in terms of how well do people understand school funding. Part of the poll's value is it's really a snapshot of where people stand. And I think if you look at some of the individual questions, you see significant don't know, anywhere between 10 and 25% on many questions. And so I think, the poll results are a snapshot of the people who are asked the question. And I think, it falls to the engagement work group and then to the commission to, like you were saying, educate people, or if the commission thinks that it has found a better solution to school funding, I think just because people answer in particular ways on the survey doesn't mean that it's not a good chance for the commission to make its case about why it thinks that it's come to, positive conclusions about school funding.
So as Carrie also noted that they'll be there for us on the 22nd and also for the General Commission meeting as they look at the survey too. Any other comments on the survey at this point in time? Okay, so let's go to have Carrie and review the findings of the youth engagement activities and as we look forward to dealing with the school and municipal leader engagement that we're going to be having in the next week or so. Carrie, you want to talk about what happened with at least the last week? Very, very engaging with the students that came online with us last week.
Yes, we had a public comment session with youth last week on Wednesday. We had a group from Manchester who are part of English learning classes, and Liz Kerwin and her student teacher Angelina Gillespie were there supporting their students, and my colleague Andres Mejia from New Hampshire Listens was also there. And they, I think there was around 16 students who had prepared statements, and a couple read them out loud. There was another student there, or person there from, I think, the Exeter as well. And so those public comments are available online under October 7th. I'm not going to summarize them right now. I think we have a youth focus group tonight, and I will prepare a summary similar to the senior focus group and the Taxpayer Association focus group that I prepared for today. So it'll be like a 1 or 2 page summary, and I'll share those with all of you at probably our October 29th meeting or 22nd.
So why don't you review the group summaries of the 65 plus and the taxpayers group that we had earlier.
Okay. I just sent those earlier today, so I am going to share my screen on this one. I just have to find the right document. And for the focus group tonight with youth, we have a pretty small, as I'm pulling this up, we have a pretty small group. So I've asked a treat fellow with New Hampshire Listens to help me facilitate. She is also a graduate of, I think, Berlin High School. So she can also be a participant in as well. So there'll be a small group conversation this evening. So this is just a brief summary of the senior residence focus group that occurred on October 6th. We had 2 of them, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. They were online via Zoom. And this is a summary of the findings. It's 2 pages, and then the appendix has more of the stories shared and more detail. So overall, we had 11 participants who were retired educators, they're homeowners, elected officials that are retired, they currently serve or they're current candidates. They were also community volunteers working at their school gardens. And many of them came from towns that were small, like small towns, or that may be considered property poor. But they all, they held long-term experience and knowledge of school funding, and some were just there to learn more, interested in learning more. So you can see there's folks from Hill, Freedom, Stoddard, Holderness, Plymouth, Ryan, Newcastle, and Plastow. And then there's 4 registrants who did not end up attending the session. Some of the major themes that came out from the findings based on my reading are they're very similar as to other findings we're finding in engagement groups, and can help us think about, as Jordan just talked about, what do we need to share with the public for people to understand the commission's recommendations and findings in the final report. So a major concern is unsurprisingly the inequities amongst taxpayers and communities. Notes that the problem with relying on property taxes is they are done by town, and people's ability to pay has nothing to do with wealth. The comment that people's finances and property values changes throughout their life. A concern that not only is the property taxes a concern for people who are retired, but it's also a concern for first-time home buyers and people seeking to afford rent. State minimum wage is $7, someone noted, and housing costs continue to grow up. It's a struggle for people to maintain their livelihoods here. So really this sense of needing to resolve some inequities amongst low and middle income people. This includes senior residents. Small towns and their local schools face higher costs and unique challenges. That was also a theme that came out of the comments and discussion that Bruce facilitated, and I took notes. Public schools are important for local towns. There's a lot of identity linked to local schools, which seems to be more focused on lower grades, so elementary schools, whereas in middle and high school, smaller town students may go to a consolidated high school or middle school. Sometimes this can put an undue burden on smaller towns because they have to pay for all the costs of those smaller schools. It can be expensive. Residents are concerned about the students' needs and the state's future in its workforce. For instance, higher property tax towns may pay teachers less, and therefore staff do not settle in these communities. People move because they can make money elsewhere. They're moving south to the southern areas of the state. Community and parent involvement is important. A concern that there needs to be some attention to career and technical education, acknowledging that there's not enough auto mechanics or plumbers or people to take over businesses. So a concern about colleges and SATs are not for everybody. So another comment was, don't look at scores or budgets and cost per pupil, look at long-range challenges of undereducating our kids. The benefit outrides the cost in the long run. So how do you pass opportunity to the next generation? And then a concern about change needs to occur instead of history repeating itself. Some of the people in the conversation had been involved in creating formulas, the Augenblick formula, and have been tracking this issue for a while. And so they want to see change occur within this effort. And just looking at the state as a whole and thinking of the future children. So there are further notes here. That's just a synopsis for discussion. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
So any surprises from the group as we hear Carrie's report? Sounds pretty similar, doesn't it, to what we've been hearing? I think one of the things that we've heard is that those who are in property wealthy districts also have challenges with some of the residents who are on fixed incomes. I mean, we use the example of, if you got a $300,000 home in Rye and you're on a fixed income, you've got similar kinds of issues as somebody who's in a property poor town that has high wealth in their property. I mean, high property tax to offset the value of the property. So it's not unique. It's not a unique problem. I thought one of the interesting things in the survey that I saw briefly was that, like 20% of those who were surveyed have children in school. And those of us that have been involved in schools for a long time have seen just the reverse of that. It used to be, you had 25% of people who didn't have kids in school. Now it's just the reverse, where you've got 20% who have kids in school. So the ability for non-parents or property tax payers who don't have kids in school, they don't have much of a relationship with schools. And so in many cases, they don't even know what's going on in those schools. And yet they're asked to pay for it. So it's the communication to the general public is increasingly an increasing need of public schools to ensure that those who are paying their freight understand what's going on in schools. Yeah, Corrine.
I just wanted to add to that. Certainly, all of the input from so many different stakeholder groups definitely change the view of just thinking it was property wealth, which was really, to me, the largest issue that screamed. But reading the feedback from people, that's not the only issue. And the theme is very clear that people of all ages are concerned about local property tax. So it really may affect where you want to live.
Yep.
So the surveys and the focus groups definitely have brought back a lot of input from a lot of different people. You can't say it's just young people. You can't say it's just people from certain parts of the state. You can't say it's just retirees. It really gave quite a broad spectrum of people in the state that are very concerned about that issue.
Mel,
Yeah.
I'm starting to, I'm wanting to get to Article 283 in the Constitution, and I'll do that while I'm doing this. But what I heard in the outcomes there, Carrie, is the purpose of education. There was some alignment with the Constitution. Oh my God, maybe we got it right somewhere along the way. But the notion of an education that links to workforce needs, that is the economic propulsion to the state. I think that there's a way to say schools fulfill a constitutional need, social need, an economic need, and a constitutional responsibility. Anyway, I'm just trying to find those nuggets, right? All right.
Yeah.
Not catching a lot of facial response initially, but.
You said that's 283.
Yeah, Article 2, Section 83.
Okay.
What does that, do you have that, Gary? What's that exactly say, Jay? You obviously have looked at that.
Yeah, well, this is the one that about the cherishing the opportunity.
Okay, that's where the term cherishing comes into. Okay.
Leading to the and opportunity, both are mentioned, and then about to promote the trades and other state interests.
Yeah, Mary Heath.
Thank you. Did you detect any urgency in the survey with regard to our workforce? You said there are some concerns, but is there an urgency? Being one of the oldest states in the country, we really have an issue that we have to be concerned about, and the quality of education becomes more important than ever before. Did you get any sense of that? Did that come out?
You mean in some of these focus groups that we've had?
Yes.
Yeah. Carrie, what's your sense on that?
It's definitely, I'm just making some notes as this is great because these are key points and questions that we can bring into the final report as we're walking across all the data and then aligning it with the other work groups and recommendations. This is great. I think that is something, Mary, that is brought up over and over. It's brought up in the educator survey from July. I think it comes up in focus groups. I'll be interested to see what the youth say tonight about their thoughts about that. And then we have a municipal and school leader reprise or a conversation on October 27th. And that is something that they also talked about. In terms of urgency, I can't make that. I don't know if I can make that assumption, but I think that that conversation is a concern.
I will say that Mary, in the conversation that we had with the students last week, there was clearly an urgency, no question about that. And there was a constant. It was interesting. There's a constant comparison between the students who are in Manchester and those who went to Pinkerton. That seemed to be. They looked at kind of at Pinkerton as the golden ground for education, and why aren't they having the same kinds of experiences at, let's say, Manchester West as they are in Pinkerton? And is that fair? And obviously the students don't have the same background that those of us that have been involved in education for a long time, but they clearly sees the disparity between the opportunities that are available. And they talked about the need to have more teachers so they could have more opportunities in their schools vis-a-vis that of what's going on in Pinkerton. Now, I have no idea how they know what's going on in Pinkerton, but that has been kind of the gold standard that they are trying to replicate for why don't they have the same kind of experiences in their school. So that urgency was clearly there with the students because they know they've got a defined period of time within their 4 years vis-a-vis what they're not being able to see as a comparable education from Pinkerton.
Well, and if I could add, that's kind of a political thing, and I think Sue Heward might be aware of the politics that are going on between Manchester and Hooksett in terms of pulling their kids out of Manchester and sending them to Pinkerton. And they talk about Pinkerton has this unbelievable campus and a brand new science building, and they have so many different resources. And then when you look at Central High School and the lack of resources that are available to the kids, all of a sudden Hooksett, in fact, took all their kids and brought them all to Pinkerton. And I think there were just a few left at Manchester High School Central.
Oh.
There's if I may, there are a few left at Central and a couple left at West. And the Hooksett kids can go to either Pinkerton or Bow. They really, we ship them almost wherever they want to go. Unfortunately, when this was a big topic a couple of years ago, a couple of things happened that really colored people's feelings. One was one of the executives from one of the local larger companies in Manchester who lives in Hooksett. His child he had 2 children, one of whom literally did not have a chair to sit in in her classes. And it went on for a year. She was either sitting on the floor or standing for the class. And that, of course, spoke, wildly and widely to parents in Hooksett.
So do the students in Hooksett, how do they get to Pinkerton?
By bus, they leave very early in the morning. It's a 45-minute drive from here to there. I see the kids getting on the bus at 6:30 in the morning.
Wow.
Hmm.
So I'd forgotten that. You're right. That's where that comparison comes from then. Okay.
But
And then-
that story makes sense. It makes for, we heard from the students, in a few of their comments and their prepared statements, they talked about wanting more students in their school in Manchester. And so now that makes those comments make more sense with that context now.
For the West students in particular, because the Hooksett students pretty much divided, not evenly. The majority did go to Central, and many of the Hooksett parents are in fact Central alums. But there was a goodly group that chose to go to West because of the focus on the arts. Arts and music were really exceptional from their perception at West. Once the Bedford kids moved to their own high school, it changed, and the neighborhoods around West have changed. And so many of the students who go to West at this point, English is not their first language. I thought it was wonderful during the session last week when one of the teachers talked about the fact that English may in fact be their fourth or fifth language.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Bruce, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm just, I wanted to highlight some converging themes that I think we're getting from our engagement and work, including the survey as well as the focus groups. So I want to take this back to this morning's fiscal policy meeting. We were hearing from the policymakers in Massachusetts. And one of the things that they pointed out was that teacher qualifications and compensating teachers who are well qualified is associated with more positive, stronger student outcomes and less turnover. So when teachers are compensated well, when they're appropriately qualified and compensated, they're less likely to be moving around districts. We know that school districts that spend less per pupil are also going to be paying their teachers less relatively and get a higher turnover rate. And so you get these kind of compounding factors around the student experience related to who their teachers are and what how the teachers are being compensated and what the turnover rates are. In the student focus groups last week, especially from the English language learners, but I think from all of our students, we heard them talk so highly about the teachers that were serving them.
Yep.
And how much difference the teachers were making in their lives. They referenced, lab equipment and textbooks and classroom and buildings and so on, but it's they kept coming back to their relationship with their teachers and how those teachers' skills were making a difference in their lives. We also, when we asked that a similar question in the Granite State poll, what do you think are the most critical ingredients that go into a high quality education or adequate education? I forget how the question was worded. The majority of responses were about the teachers. It was the teachers that make the most difference. So on the one hand, our commission is focusing right now on understanding student outcomes as opposed to the cost inputs into a student's education. What I guess what I want to highlight here and have us kind of keep track of as we think about our findings is outcomes reflect the kind of experiences that students have had with their teachers over their K-12 lifetime. And things like higher test scores, attendance rates, graduation rates are partially attributable to the qualifications of teachers and the stability and consistency that students have. So we're not throwing input variables out of the picture here. We want to continue to think about teacher salaries, things like class sizes, availability of equipment and curriculum in their schools, labs, and that kind of thing. All of those, though, are what make a difference in terms of student outcomes. And given the AIR analysis that we have, we know that students who are in underfunded districts perform at a lower rate than students that are in districts that achieve a state average or above in terms of per pupil expenditures. So sorry, I'm rambling at this point. I'm going to stop. But I do hear I'm beginning to hear some threads that tie together here that tell a story about student experience that leads to the kind of outcomes that we're wanting to achieve in our state using a funding model that smooths out the inequities that currently exist.
I think one of the other things that was mentioned this morning too that ties into this was the comment around best practices and that the issue of class size it can be augmented by an increase in class size if in fact there are the support systems that are there for the teacher to basically continue to meet those needs, whether it be paraprofessionals, other resources, etc. I thought that, and I'd heard that from the Finland story, as far as teacher quality and resources available to the teachers to deal with higher class sizes, and let's say just one teacher for 20 solves the problem. Well, that clearly doesn't do it too. So I thought that was, and that's relevant to what the students were saying last week too. They really praised the teachers that they had and valued the support systems that they got from them, even in a school that had less resources than, let's say, a Pinkerton.
And I think that comes out in the educator survey findings that we put out as well, is that focus on teacher salary, teacher quality where the highest counts, class sizes, and then the focus on what staffing and supports for students are needed in order for people to feel successful. I think that's definitely across our activities. That is something that continues to come forward.
Yeah, one thing that I think gets hidden in that idea that we just talked about also is the continuity of school leadership. Because one of the issues that we discovered in House Education Committee was, for example, in Newport, in a 5-year period, I'm not sure the data is right, I'm about to say, but the example is, in a 5-year period, they had 4 superintendents of schools. And I mean, when you have a constant turnover, either in a principalship or even in a superintendentship, that also has a big impact upon the quality of the schools, because there's what's the direction, what's the mission. So it's both, I think, not only from a teacher standpoint, clearly, but I think from a school leadership, it's very important, because if you don't have the right school leadership, you can have a great staff, but if you don't have that leadership that's there, that's providing the kind of developmental issues for staff, et cetera, and vision for kids to also see, that's an important part of this equation too.
So I just want to remind us that, and Carrie, you may have more current information on this, Reaching Higher is currently engaged in research in a number of districts across the state to see what the relationship is between teacher salaries and student outcomes. And so we should be sure to make use of that data as it becomes available. Carrie, do you know what the status of that effort is right now?
I do not know. I do know Reaching Higher is listening in.
they always are. They're good friends.
So I don't have any information on that though.
But that might be useful.
Liz is raising her hand if we want to.
Say that again, Carrie.
Here comes Liz Canada to give us a update.
Hi, folks.
Hi, Liz. What's the update on Bruce's comment?
We published our teacher salary briefs. I think we published that maybe in July or in the summer. So those teacher salary briefs are available. We have an analysis on bachelor's degrees only, and we have one on master's degree only. specifically about teacher salary schedules. So that's what districts can offer rather than what teachers are currently being paid. We'd be happy, I'm not prepared to do that right now, but I would be happy to come back and share more information, or I can, Bruce, I can send you those briefs directly if you want to distribute those, but let me know what would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Liz. I should have remembered that you had already posted that. I'm just trying to put all these pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together.
No worries, no worries.
I think, Liz, as the data becomes clearer now, both through the engagements that we've had, and also through, I think, probably when we get a further, deeper evaluation of the survey that the UNH has done, the data that you've gathered will be a nice complement, probably more specific around the issue to the more general response that we've been getting from others too. So thank you for that.
Sure thing. Yes, just let me know, Bruce or Representative Myler, let me know what would be helpful from us, but that information is there and I'm happy to come back, or you can use them on your own. Thanks, folks.
Very good. Okay. Carrie, anything else dealing with the engagement? We spent some good time here on the student focus. We've got one tonight that we'll be able to hear from again. So.
I also have a summary from the Taxpayer Association focus group.
Tell us what they did.
Okay. Jay, you had a hand up. I wasn't.
Jay?
I wanted to comment on Bruce's observation relative to the inputs. And I think that is the takeaway that I'm getting both from the survey information, the discussion in the tax policy group this morning, struck me as a challenge for our group to recognize that the outcomes, this is what Iris was saying, that this is, for her, it's a circular argument. Inputs create outputs. Outputs define the inputs. It's not exactly that for me, but it didn't, meaning that I don't know that it's circular, but there are linear relationships. Leaving that aside, we've got to explain that the kind of inputs that are needed in property poor and student needy communities are different and greater than what there is today. We've got to make this translation. Because people do think talking about outcomes just is not as concrete as being able to talk about the great experience I had with my third grade teacher. Nobody asks you, what were the average outcomes of your school? They ask you, what's your fondest memory of public schools or your schooling? And we've got to be able to speak of how those connections aren't as beneficial in the property poor, student needy communities. And why is that? Because there is the turnover, because there isn't the sufficient funding. Anyway, see where I'm going. I'm probably in this as shallow a water as Bruce was when he quit. So I'm going to stop too.
Thank you anyway, Jay.
No, I think this is an issue that we can't step past it. It's just, and we've got to be able to have a pithy way of describing our outcomes-based model will lead to the kind of inputs that students need to be more successful.
Well, and again, you come back to the concept that what you're saying is that this is a student-centered approach, as far as I look at it. It's not like a school of supplies, libraries, et cetera. It really begins to move more to what is the impact upon students and their outcomes, rather than what the facility might look like. It was interesting. I think one of the things I did see I was concerned about school facilities, et cetera. I think as you look at the survey, I just briefly think I saw the survey, that issue of facility is way down the list as it relates to what's important to the public. Now, I know we've talked about facilities before, but as they look at what the key thing is, clearly the issue of staffing, et cetera, is way above what the facility and technology and all that other stuff is. That if you've got a good person that's working that classroom, that's where the magic takes place. So, okay. Anything else on that student feedback? We'll add to it based upon what we find tonight.
So Mel, Mel,
yeah.
just one thing based on that last comment on facilities, and I think I generally agree with it, but also, since so much of this work is tied in with equity and student equity, access, I think, does become an issue. And with a lot of our school buildings, 50 years or more old, they don't provide equitable access to students with disabilities or students with special needs. And that may be something, and I'm not sure it's an engagement question. It could be, but definitely an adequacy question, maybe in consideration with any sort of categorical program for building aid. Maybe accessibility needs to be considered higher up in the scoring of something like that.
Well, I think too, Dave, I think that's a nice segue into a question that we had dealing with framing the next conversation with our municipal and school leaders, which is going to take place later this month on the 27th. And Carrie has some data that she has shared with the group here that you might want to pull that up on the screen, Carrie. We want some feedback upon our approach. It's a reprise. It's their second go around. They gave us initial input. This is the next conversation that we're going to have with them later this month. So why don't we move to that, Carrie, and bring up those issues on your screen share there, so that we can get some feedback from the group on whether or not those are the right kinds of questions, particularly in relationship to what David just said upon the facility question, because that may be an issue that they can address.
Do you want me to go over the Taxpayer Association findings real quick?
Yeah, let's do that. Then we'll jump to the other one. Yeah.
Okay. So on just a minute. So similar summary document. The goal of all these summary documents is to be able to look across them and look across the themes and the points to find themes and things that carry through and unique perspectives, as we've been pointing out. So that's great. Oh, you couldn't hear me. Sorry. On October 1st, we had a Taxpayer Association focus group. Bruce facilitated and I took notes. There are 7 participants that were homeowners, Taxpayer Association representatives, elected officials, business professionals, and parents. They had children with varying school experiences who attended public schools, Catholic schools, charter schools, the Virtual Learning Academy charter school, Montessori schools, and were homeschooled. Participants were both long-term public servants and leaders with vast knowledge about school funding, and participants were also newer to understanding school funding and wanted to learn more. There were 3 participants that were specifically representing taxpayer associations, and there are 3 participants who are currently a local elected leader running for office, and then there was an additional resident of Portsmouth. So as you can see, there is 1 representative from the Granite Taxpayers. There's 1 representative from the Concerned Taxpayers of Manchester, a representative from the Taxpayers of Hampton, or the Rational Taxpayers of Hampton, 2 residents of Portsmouth, one of which was a school board member, a resident of Rye, who's a state level representative from the Finance Committee who is listening in, a resident from Nashua running in a local election, then 2 registrants who were unable to attend. So again, I just organized this into themes based on my reading. And so there are some key points that I pulled out from participants, and then the appendix, there are additional stories and further detail for those who want to read further into that. So one of the major areas with school funding related to student outcomes needs clarity. So this is kind of what we just discussed in some ways. Some of the key points here were per pupil funding is different from one community to another. It is difficult to tell what the metric is for an adequately taught student across communities. A participant who was skilled in data analysis was especially concerned about misinformation and misunderstanding between understanding achievement and school funding. And mentioned the correlation between I think it was outcomes and poverty. So additionally, their students and school needs go beyond the current direct costs per pupil. So it's a challenge to find good local employees. We need an educated workforce where people can remain here and not have to move to find a job. Sports, and it was mentioned that sports and clubs are important for students, especially if they help them be engaged in the learning processes. Also, sometimes they're safe places to go after school as well, places to be and find community. There are significant needs in Manchester that shift by zip code. There was a discussion about how just by ward, there may be different opportunities for students. Students should be able to attend schools, charter, private, or public based on their needs. Funding per pupil should stay with the student. One size does not necessarily fit all. And the comment that charter and Catholic schools include many people of color who find these schools better for their children. Manchester spends, so just the notion, comment that Manchester spends approximately 13 million on debt service, 6 million on transportation. So kind of this focus on what are the other costs that need to be considered, and what's the difference between the direct costs that exist and that may be a direct cost. So accounting for local costs and affordability concerns, who pays and who can pay. So thinking about residents feeling like they can't afford to live in their communities anymore and being pushed out of their homes because of higher tax bills, what are the protections for them? The Hampton Taxpayer Association commented they're concerned about their budgets, especially now with concern to the pandemic and what kind of costs might be cut when the revenue coming into town is much less than before the pandemic hit. A taxpayer association is going to be focused on how much taxpayers are paying. And the idea that more revenue or different revenue sources are not necessarily going to solve the problem of a concern about how much taxes people are paying. There was a slight discussion about the tiered property taxes and other states doing this to help with allocation. And let's see. the different ways people are taxed based on if they're from out of town, out of state, or they have a second home. Is there different ways that people should be paying taxes in those cases? And then this came up in the senior focus group as well, as talking about how the taxes for residential taxpayers has gone up, feeling like it's gone up more than say businesses. So the residents are facing more of a burden in that case. And just this, it's not about the cost, it's about how we allocate the dollars to the public systems. And then finally, another major theme that came up was concerns about the definition of adequacy, distribution, and cherish. These have been conversations, I think, throughout the study. And so these are a couple of points that were pulled from the notes in the appendix. So our Constitution speaks of an adequate education. There needs to be a better definition for today's society. And then this feeling that there seems to be a misalignment among definitions between distribution and adequate education, the notion of proportional and reasonable. And then another comment about the use of the word cherish by the general court.
Carrie, in your conversations, were there any discussion regarding any alternative form of taxation?
It doesn't seem to be I think there is one comment from that group, not from a person representing a taxpayer association, who talked about, what about a gas tax? What about meals and room and meals taxes? But I feel like, and Bruce, you can chime in here, I don't feel like that's a big, it's mentioned, but it's not something that is focused on most of the time. Most people are worried about affording to live where they live. Bruce, would you?
Yeah, I think that's for both the senior resident focus group and the Taxpayer Association focus group. They honestly are not concerned right now about whether there be new kinds of taxes imposed, because I expect that they're assuming that that's not happening on the horizon. What they're most concerned about is how to manage the current ways in which property is taxed in order to pay for local schools. And so pretty much the themes that Carrie identified. So nobody was advocating for new or different kinds of revenue sources for our schools. I would say in general, especially those two focus groups, those constituents, were focused on ways to make the way that we pay for our schools using property taxes to be more equitable and less punitive for folks on fixed incomes or people who live in property poor districts with high mill rates.
Did the issue of circuit breakers or tax abatement, did any of that come up during the conversation?
It did. People are aware that, in fact, one person mentioned that I think she or her family had taken advantage of that. And the comment that came along with that was that it's really a very, very small program and hasn't been used very widely and hasn't made a difference.
Okay. Other questions of the group here to Carrie or Bruce?
I think some of the themes that you're coming up with, the extent to which you can now take them and through the discussion groups, maybe hone in on some of these, because I think you're really getting at real questions. Yeah. That it would be good for the the engagement portion of the report to reflect where how the findings relate to the public input.
Yeah.
So, Mel, where you say the circuit breaker discussion, that didn't even come up today in our discussion with
No, it didn't.
Massachusetts, and it was on my mind that what have they done with their definition? Clearly, as we talk about, is the state raising enough money to cover adequacy, base adequacy with the local tax, and I think that connects to the circuit breaker, and so we, through the discussion groups, what if we had a circuit breaker, would local property taxation continue to be your preferred way of funding? I'm just trying to say that I think your findings ought to multiply and begin to define what the questions are in subsequent focus groups.
Okay. Okay, anything else on that? Then Carrie, let's go to your work papers that you have for the reprise of the municipal and school leader group that's coming up on the 27th, and see what feedback you want to get from us.
So Jay's comment, exactly where I hope this conversation will go regarding this discussion guide. This is the municipal and school leader. We're calling it a reprise. We're inviting back the registrants and participants from the June focus groups of these leaders. And so this is a time to think about those types of questions, like how are we going to build, how are we going to receive more feedback based on the questions not only the commission has and what the commission has been observing and finding, so we can build out more knowledge. And then so this will happen on October 27th, and then there's a legislative learning exchange we're hoping to do around November 10th. And so those would be the two opportunities where we ask these additional questions.
I should tell you too that we currently have 27 people lined up for on the 27th, with a reminder going out to groups. So we hope that will even be more than 27. And there's a plan that in this conversation that they'll be able to break up into small groups and have significant conversations, and coming back to the whole group and sharing what they had. So Carrie, can you put up on the screen, share the screen of the document that you shared with us? Thank you.
So this discussion guide has quite a bit more background information than other discussion guides have had, just because of where we're at now. What we found. So what I've done is I've taken some of the one-page summaries, notes from the interim report, looking at some of the critical questions. And so I've taken a lot of what has been written and put it into this space so that we can provide some background for participants and an update, similar to what we did with stakeholders on September 9th. I'm not going to read through this part. But please feel free to share any comment or critique. So this is just an introduction to the discussion guide. And so right now, I put kind of just a list of potential questions. And I drew these questions from the question bank that the engagement group developed at the beginning of work in May. And then also from the critical questions that we've been tracking throughout this process. So let me know if you want me to read the questions out loud, or if everyone would like to take a minute and read the questions, and then we can have a discussion.
Let us read the 3 bullet points in front of us, and then we'll see if there's some questions around that. You don't need to read those for us, Carrie.
Okay, great.
Any response to our feedback on those 3 bullets?
Sure.
This is a time for group participation. No question
Yeah.
about that. Okay,
Yeah.
David.
So on the second one, is total statewide spending enough for an opportunity for adequate comparable outcomes? I would think the answer to that isn't so much about the total. Well, it could be about the total with respect to adequate, but it's about the distribution in costs based on the unique characteristics of the students and the districts, of each student and the districts they're in, as far as comparable is related, is at issue. So I think that is a question. So.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any others on those 3 bullets? Susan?
The first question is loaded with information. And I was just trying to figure out a way to do in the first question, much like you did in the second question. And by loaded, I don't mean charged in any way. Dense is probably a better word, because you're asking necessary elements for public school funding that is bipartisan and able to solicit widespread support. And then, we've been talking about it for quite a while, but the whole equitable opportunity for an adequate public school education, that's a lot of words. And we've already had a couple of comments when we're talking about the survey where someone brought up what's the difference between equitable and equity. So I have a comment and not much feedback, and I see Corinne nodding, and I'm hoping maybe she'll bail me out.
Corinne, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, there was a lot of words there. Where it says school-aged young people seemed kind of clunky to me. And I thought, well, as long as we add public school-aged children, and maybe that question could be broken up into 2 questions versus 1, or the first part, like Susan was talking about, could be a statement of some sorts that leads to that question. Let me read, I'll read it again. How about, there are necessary elements of a public school funding policy that is, I don't see the rest of it. Okay. I don't know, I lost my train of thought. why don't you just, after bipartisan, policy that is bipartisan that can have an equitable opportunity for an adequate public school education. Cut the middle piece. We're talking about the same group of people, kids who are in
Yeah.
schools.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else can polish that up. Maybe that can be polished up a little bit, but
Yeah, I agree, Corinne. I think, yeah, you could say something like, what do you think are the necessary elements of a public school funding policy that is bipartisan and provides an equitable opportunity for an adequate public
Right.
school education?
Yeah.
Or something,
yeah,
yeah.
that should cover it.
So just to throw something else at this, these are great questions, but I mean, would it be helpful to be asking, like, I don't know, like we're all trained, we're all shown how important it is to ask open-ended questions, but are we getting down to sort of like getting to some yeses and nos on things for policy consideration?
Well, this is specifically asking what are the necessary elements. So they can't answer yes or no to that.
No, I know, but what if we were to sort of list out some potential necessary elements
Oh, I
and
see.
get
Okay.
people's
Yep.
So David, what would be an example of that in your mind?
Targeted funding. I mean, I'm not saying that that's necessary or not, but it's certainly it's a controversial issue, and some people might think it's necessary, some people might think it's absolutely out of the question.
So I think like that's where, so it's like this final one, I'm gonna scoot us up here. This one was more like, what do you need to know about the commission based on your role? I wasn't sure what kind of information we would provide in terms of specific. So these are some of the questions that I pulled from some of the, these are some questions that we've tracked. So I pulled these in kind of thinking what you were thinking, or maybe what you were thinking, Dave, I'm not sure. I just wanted to point us to the second part here.
So the sub-points of the original question, is what Carrie is saying, would potentially deal with your specifics, Dave, that you were talking about.
When I think of David's question, I'm thinking of the top level finding from the AIR study. Should we be targeting funding on the basis of capacity, communities' capacity to pay and student need? All right, maybe not all the right words in the right sequence, but that's our top level finding, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Well, but you also, I think, Jay, aren't you also adding that on the ability to pay and not only student needs, but student outcomes?
The outcomes are dependent on the community's capacity and student need. So whatever our words are for community capacity, I mean, they've linked it with tax rates, right?
Yeah.
And property valuations. We can say poverty but that's I mean, I've had to summarize this report this weekend, in some survey or newspaper response I needed to give. And, so yes, student outcomes, sure, it defines student outcomes, but also targeted assistance ought to be, in order to support student outcomes or comparable student outcomes for every kid in the state now, we need to take into account a community's capacity to raise funds and student needs, which relate to poverty.
I like the statement community capacity because I think it really, I haven't seen those terms used in any of our summaries or any work that we've talked about. But I think for the average person, property owner on the street, they're going to understand what that means. And I like how that states. Thanks. I did have some other wording concerns just above that, where it says what components of public schooling supports students' positive outcomes later in life. Seems like a mouthful. And I think you mean to say the components of public school programming support students' positive outcomes. Just want to make sure that means the same to everybody. But the public schooling support sounds funny to me. Public school.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Mel,
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dick. Yes, go ahead.
maybe we can scroll back to the top of this thing. Yeah. Just a couple of, I guess, questions and comments. The easier one is in the language in red where it starts with target.
Yep.
I think you mean to say, should we target state funding? Because
Good
the other
catch.
money is going to be
Yep.
local.
Yeah.
And then above that, where you say, is total statewide spending enough for an opportunity for adequate comparable outcomes? I'm not really, Dave sort of raised questions about this, and maybe he got to them, but I don't know why we'd ask that question. You're talking about total statewide spending. How would anybody know? Is the distribution of spending where we've got a problem?
Yeah.
And that's a very different matter.
So Dick, are you saying that the red comment there, based upon a point that David made, should that become that lead
Yeah,
question there?
that would be a whole lot better. I
think
just
that's the
don't see
lead
the
question.
usefulness of the other one.
That's the lead question, yeah.
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 You're asking for too big a leap for the
Yeah,
respondents in the
Yeah.
original question.
Yeah. So the red would basically replace the original query.
Yep.
Gary, is this the kind of feedback you're looking for?
Yeah, I think, these, I think it's important. It's nice that there's people from other work groups here, especially because we want to start linking, like, what are the main things that, you know, so summarizing the AIR report, saying something to the public, what are our main questions? And this group specifically, and then the Legislative Learning Exchange, these are folks that are decision makers, budget makers. They run schools. So I think it's important to, this discussion is good.
Okay, let's continue then with your bullets and see where we go.
And don't feel boxed in by these. These are points or questions for discussion, and new questions can also be added to this list. This is a beginning.
So let's read these two bullet points and then comment. So what are our thoughts on these two major bullet points here?
You can also add new questions.
In the bullet point, it says, what do you need to know on the commission's recommendations?
Yeah.
Just, I think categorical aid programs might be, you might have to say outside the funding formula, outside the distribution formula. I don't know, something, I don't know that everybody knows what categorical programs are. I mean, I see that you've defined them there, but I think they need to hear something about, these are categorical, means they're outside the.
Yeah, you could do that in the second sub bullet
Yes, right.
and say what issues need to be addressed relative to categorical programs that will be funded outside of the main adequacy formula or something like that.
It seems to me that the sub-bullets 3 and 4 are answering a different question. If the primary question is, what do you need to know about the commission's recommendations based on your role in the community? It seems like the third and fourth one are, what do you want the commission to know? So it's asking them to, advise us.
I would say, and as we so kind of the design for this, and Bruce, please interrupt and add in here. when we're thinking about this design and how we've conducted other focus groups is we come with some framing questions. And then as we get to know the group, other questions are posed based on where the conversation is going, clarifying questions. So we're envisioning, the beginning of this will be kind of an explanation of where the commission is, some of the findings. And then, I've invited, Mel to introduce, and then Bruce will moderate and kind of give some summary. Then we'll break out into smaller groups and we'll have a conversation based on these guiding questions. And then we'll come back together as a large group to kind of digress a little bit about what was discussed, and then to kind of see if there's any questions that people want to pose to the commission. And so in these questions, it's, thinking really about like, what are the areas that we want to hear based on the adequacy discussions, the AIR report, the fiscal policy discussions. What are the areas we want feedback from these leaders on? I guess is another way to frame how we think about these questions as well. Can't see anyone's faces right now, so I'm not sure if that was helpful. But there it is.
Other comments, observations regarding these final bullets?
One of the questions, and I don't know that this relates to your conversation or my next meeting, but but I'm going to try it. The opportunity for an adequate education and the opportunity for comparable outcomes. And I'm finding myself trying to think of those two terms.
I don't know if I'm spelling that right, but.
Oh, you got it. I see one as measurable and the other as, how would you ever measure the opportunity for an adequate education? I suppose you could just go to the list and say checkbox, checkbox, checkbox.
Well, if I can try.
Go ahead, Dick.
Why don't you just link the two? I mean, Jay, the opportunity for an adequate education that provides
Comparable outcomes.
that enables comparable outcomes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, don't want to fight the whole statute, do we?
No, we don't want to do that. And earlier, Jay, you referred to the Constitution. I think it was in this work group. It might have been the earlier one. I can't remember. You were looking for part 2,
83.
section 83,
Yeah.
which is where the language cherish comes up.
Right.
And if I had to comment on that, I'd say that we're beyond looking at the word cherish. We're looking at what the Supreme Court has said about that word. And what is said is that every student, that it's the duty of the state to provide to every student an adequate education.
Right.
So I just, just a comment really on that earlier.
Yeah.
Reach for the Constitution. It's the Constitution as interpreted by the court that we're working with now.
Good point.
So we can work those red points into a query of some sort then.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Anything else beyond that? the closing thoughts and steps, or any questions there that we need to review?
Nope, just kind of a summary of
Okay, all right.
So maybe on the phase-in bullet, Carrie, maybe we want to get specific with some sub-items, since, looking at the audience here, municipal school leaders, things like, we talked about this morning, Massachusetts has a hold harmless provision. No district gets less than the total state allocation than they got the previous year. And I think that's independent on ADM.
Not only that, Dave, they get $30 per student more.
Plus, they get $30 per student more in the foundation base, or some, I think.
Somewhere there.
And they get a
Percent increase.
Right.
Right.
Will you sum that up? I heard hold harmless provision, district ADM.
So a school district wouldn't receive any less state aid than they would, than they received the prior year. And I think what Dick said was, and I'm not sure what they said, if that was inclusive of the $30, or if it was dollar for dollar, they wouldn't receive any less.
I think it's additional for the $30, but I don't think you need to go into that here.
Yeah.
I think it's the hold harmless is hold harmless as a concept everybody understands.
Yeah.
And I would just stop there.
Yeah.
That is such an idea killer.
No, but these are things that this targeting group is going to be, not targeting, this municipal school leaders group, I think is going to be interested in too.
You bet.
I totally agree with you. I
Yeah.
thought it as I was reading it as well,
Yeah.
that the recent messaging around hold harmless that we've been getting, as undermining as I think that concept is to the goals of this commission, I think with the audience you're talking about, it's an unavoidable topic.
School boards and superintendents like predictability.
Well, they also talk about something like a regional inflation increase or something like that.
Yeah, they do. That's really saying that they're trying to have an inflation increase that's right for the particular area.
If I might, I think AAR looked at the question of whether there should be regional cost adjustments based on regional cost of living differences within the state of New Hampshire. And I'm pretty sure that AAR did look at that and decided that there were not significant variations, even though anecdotally we might think, oh, it costs more to live on the seacoast than in the North Country. They didn't find sufficient differences to add that in as a factor.
I agree. That was their finding. Yeah.
Was this one of the regression analysis that they did?
Yes, no, it is. It is. They
Yeah.
had it as a variable.
Yeah.
I think linking some of the questions to like exactly what you're doing right now was my hope. And I think like the hope in terms of how we as an engagement group kind of intersect with the other work group right now, we really want to start weaving it together.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, are there questions that can be
I have
posed?
another question that may or may not fit here, but it's certainly one that we on the commission are puzzling over, and that is the small schools or small school districts, and whether there should be special allowance, incremental funding for small schools or small school districts. Or,
Yeah,
or would,
definitely, yeah.
or would such an allowance provide an unwanted incentive to
Stay small.
stay small or fragment, to break up?
Well, I think there was a discussion around those who are small school based upon their area vis-a-vis those who vote to be small just to be small because they want to be small.
Right.
I mean, there's a want and there's a need, and I
Yeah.
think there's a differentiation between those two.
Right. And there's a real tension between, particularly at the lower grades, between staying small and local so that you can have involvement from
Yeah.
the community, and being efficient and joining with maybe a faraway town to
Yeah.
have a more efficient operation.
And this group would understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there any other, I mean, are there any other points or considerations that we want to put in front of this group to see?
Well, I think we've covered some of the other issues, though, in the questions and the issues that were above.
Yeah, I think this is good.
Yeah, this is good to have I think you're right, Carrie. This has been good to get the two other work groups together involved in these questions. This is great.
Yeah, just on that point of cross-fertilization, work group cross-fertilization, I agree with that, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to come to all of these. But I think the public engagement work is very important, and some of what and all of what you've found and summarized, Carrie, is important for the others who might not see what has come out of these meetings, to bring it to their attention somehow. And so that's one point. And then I just want to ask this question because I do think this work is good, and the findings are interesting and provocative. But the question is going to be asked, and I'll ask it. Are these reliable indicators? Is the audience, are the people who've provided this information sufficiently representative to give us something that we can work with? Or is it just people who have already are in the game and want to influence the outcome? I mean, is it biased in some way, or is it good stuff that we can really rely on?
I think, well, if anyone else wants to answer, I can see what my thoughts are, but I'll wait.
Well, go ahead, Carrie, because you're the one who's been, you and Bruce have been the ones who've been there's a continuity factor. You know, I mean, people bring.
I asked this not to challenge, but it's going to be asked.
No. It's a good question.
It is. I mean, it's any question. I mean, any sort of, so we have a couple quantitative pieces, and, you know, so I think like what we have is like the Grant State poll is a random sample. So that allows us a certain kind of perspective of the public, knowing that surveys are biased towards certain demographics at times. The educator survey we sent out to all the districts. So it's not a random sample, but it is, there is, you know, there's quite a few parents that have responded in that survey. There are teachers at different levels. There are administrators and districts across New Hampshire, small and large, rural, suburban, urban. Across, you know, we've analyzed the data by I can never remember. Equalized. EVPP.
There you go.
And I'm in a course on school funding, and I think that is in my opinion the public across many different viewpoints. I think that there are some people who come in with quite a bit of knowledge and history and maybe some agendas, but I think from the findings there's commonalities, and then there's also this clearness of like what people's understandings or concerns are. So if you're someone who's really knowledgeable in this and you're finding like, that doesn't seem right, like I think that kind of tells us, okay, these are just, these are people in communities trying to figure out how this works, and they want to provide their thinking on it. Just, I don't know, I don't feel like that was very eloquently put, but that's
Well, I think
on the spot.
Dick, for me,
But something
is that
in the report for sure.
is that people bring their information and their biases to the conversation, but we need to realize, when has this happened before? When has there been a group that has gone out to the community and sought their input? I mean, before, when we've had these groups, it's been fairly insular. I mean, or you bring the experts in to talk to the group, but we've never asked for students. We've rarely gone out and asked for specifically for taxpayer representatives to come talk to us. So I think that alone is very unique for this process. And we've got more opportunities for people to come in and just give us their opinion. And I think this group has done magnificent work in trying to engage a number of different people in a number of different ways. I mean, we have people who ask questions at the end of the commission meetings and they get their questions answered. Never happened before. So I think from that standpoint, I recognize your concern big time, but I think I want to counter that concern, recognize that concern with what we've tried to do in a way that this state has never done before, of trying to gather information from people. And I'm going to continue to do that. And I think that's very unique. Bruce, you had your hand up.
Mel, I wanted to kind of second Dick's question, because I didn't hear it as a challenge either, as Dick said.
No, I didn't either.
I heard it as, what's the source of information
Absolutely.
For this input? And the short answer is that we've both randomly sampled New Hampshire residents using a highly regarded, survey instrument, the United States poll, and we've asked people with specific stakes in this question, students, educators, municipal leaders who raise local money and spend local money, taxpayers, people over 65. So we're triangulating the input from various data sources to see where people's concerns are, what their level of knowledge is, and what, to the extent that they have knowledge, what their preferred directions for a solution might be. But I can guarantee you that as this rolls out and becomes more public in general, and then when it goes into the legislature next session, people will ask exactly that question that Dick is asking.
No.
Did you just ask your friends their opinions about this issue, to convince us that the data that you are working with, both from AIR and from the public input process, was robust and comprehensive enough that it's not biased in any particular direction. The survey, the random survey from GSP, and as well as the public comments we've received, all share the concern that our current system isn't fair for taxpayers and for students. And so our effort is to try to respond to that by collecting as much information as we possibly can. So I think it's good for us to even sort of rehearse this kind of conversation as we get ready to.
Yes, and I would, excellent responses. I would say that it should be part of the report in the preamble somewhere in there. There's got to be this context for how we went about sort of testing the waters, finding out what we needed to know, getting feedback, so forth.
No, I think Dick, your question is key to this whole thing, and I think that's why the whole engagement process has been an attempt to try to garner as much input as we has, because clearly, as we begin to look at change, your question is the one that's going to come up from those who don't want change. They're the ones that are going to say, well, I wasn't asked, and so I think trying to have a broad platform, a broad foundation representing a variety of different issues is very key. I thank you for that. I think that's very good. If I may, one of the questions that we might want to ask this group, not going back to carry your thing, one of the questions we might want to ask is, how might they suggest educating the public more about school funding? I mean, these are people who've been involved in this issue, and they recognize the complexity of the topic, but they may have some suggestions on how that might be done, starting with some of their own groups. Okay, how we doing? Everybody okay? Nods of heads, good. All right. Carrie, that does it for our agenda, doesn't it? Have we concluded it? Yes, Corinne.
Did
I
you
know
want
you're
to
anxious
approve-
to get back to the beach, Corinne. so-
I am, but did you want to approve the minutes from September 29th?
Very good. That was on my. So we have
All right.
the minutes of the which are those minutes?
September 29th?
September 29th. I know we've all read those, and are there any, I need a motion to accept those. Thank you, Corinne. Corinne moved, Susan seconded. All those say, you got the vote. I vote aye. Corinne? And Susan, raise
Yeah,
her
aye.
hand. Okay, so those are passed. Thank you very much. Any other suggestions for the good of the order? All right, well, good. Corinne, safe travels back when you're on your way back. Thanks, guys. We'll be in touch now. Take care. Meeting adjourned.